But
So
yeah, so we should get into the Katt Williams of it all.
we should.
So for those who don't know, I don't know how
How
you
could
would
you
not
not
know.
know?
I have no idea how you could not know, but Katt Williams completely broke the internet. It is still in shambles.
Where are we
For
at? Like
those who
it's over
don't
30
know,
million views at this point.
I just checked right before hitting record. It's currently at 35 million views.
I
Wow.
think I think this is so interesting because when it got to 2 million, or no, when it got to 5 million, Cat
Mhm.
Williams does his nightcap show with Ocho
Shannon
Cinco.
Sharpe.
Oh,
It's all good.
oops.
I got your back.
Shannon Sharpe does his show with Ocho Cinco Nightcap, and they have a conversation about how, you know, he said he knew that this was going to be big, and he held on to it to drop it in the new year. But he said when he thought this was going to be big, he thought 2.5 million views. That was where he capped it.
Right.
And then as he's talking to Ocho Cinco, he's like, well, obviously we've passed 2.5 million views now. And he's like, I think maybe we'll end up somewhere around 12 million views. I believe he said 12.
And Ocho said no. Ocho said it's going to be way more than that.
Yeah, he was like, you're out of here. Like this is going to go crazy. And he's like, yeah, I think we're going to end up somewhere around there. Over 30 million views is crazy.
Yeah.
And he did
Currently at
not anticipate that
35.
happening.
I mean, sometimes you will never know, right? That's the
Yeah,
interesting thing about content creation. You don't know if it's going to get 4 views, 40 views, 400,000 views, or 40
right.
million views. You just
That's
don't
true.
know. And what's interesting is prior to Cat Williams, the highest seen episode was Steve Harvey with 8.9 million views. And so this has tremendously past it. I mean, it is
Crazy.
doing ridiculous numbers, and I'm very happy for Shannon Sharpe.
Me too.
And
Me too.
he and his team are putting on a clinic, a master class on content
Absolutely.
creation and how to play the game.
Yeah.
But we're not here to talk about Shannon Sharpe and his team. We're here to talk about
Cat
Katt
Williams.
Williams and
Listen.
the gun show because he came out. Bow, bow, bow. Wait, I had a shotgun too. Bow.
I
I'm
mean,
saying, oh man,
assault rifle. Just
yeah,
spraying bullets.
yeah. He had a Gatling gun with him.
I just, I don't know. I don't even know what to say. I don't even know what to say because what do you say? He said something about everybody. Every comedian you could think of was named. Even people who were not comedians were named. And to be fair, Shannon Sharpe did ask him specific questions about certain people
Yes,
in
he did.
certain situations. Just just because I think he was just like, well, you have opinions, and you're willing
Right,
to offer them. So,
right.
because at one point he goes, "Tell me what you think about Tory Lanez and Meg Thee Stallion, because you know you have opinions."
Right.
I was just like, okay, how did we get
Yep.
here? But all right.
Yeah, and he didn't hold back any punches. Even with that, he was like, if neither one of you want to say the girl shot the girl, then shit is just gonna go the way it's gonna go. But
Right.
if you're not going to tell the truth, which is that the girl shot the girl, then that's it. And I was like, oh, so he thinks Kelsey shot Meg too. Okay, got it.
It was. He said a lot.
He did.
He said a lot,
He
and
did.
there's clearly people who he's not fond of.
Yep.
He loves D.L. Hughley.
Yep.
Let's get that out.
And Bernie Mac
And Wanda Sykes.
and Dave
Sykes,
Chappelle.
not Smith. Sykes.
Correct. That's right.
And Dave Chappelle.
Yep.
Everybody else can go.
Well, apparently everyone else is on the same squad. That's what he said.
Right. Right.
Or they're just wearing dresses, which is,
And he don't like that either.
it's hard to like the emasculation of black men.
Sure.
I mean, we can talk about that another time if you like, but that's what he said.
That's what he said. I
Well,
understand.
I saw the interview. Oh, go ahead, you first.
No, I was just gonna say I understand. I understand where he's coming from. I also think that people, you know, accept the bottom sometimes. So there's also that.
Okay. Well, we could talk about it another time perhaps, but I wanted to say I saw the interview in its entirety, and it was the next day. I saw it Thursday morning, and so it was still at maybe 4.6 million views at the time,
Mhm.
but the internet was already buzz, 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 buzz,
Yeah.
buzzing. Um, and I know everyone is focused on all of the quote unquote shots he was busting. But what I also found interesting was there was just a lot I learned about Katt Williams. I am a Katt Williams fan. Me and Dre used to go see Katt Williams all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And even in that, there was still a bunch of stuff about his life I had no clue about. I didn't know Katt Williams was a genius with a 100 and I think it was 162 IQ score, it says on the internet.
Yeah.
I didn't know he was this childhood prodigy who could have been in college at 12 and a doctor at, he was Doogie Howser.
You didn't know he read 3,000 books a year.
Oh, all right. Yep. He also said that. I didn't know that he
Wait, let's
was
not glaze
homeless,
over
and
that. Let's not.
I don't think that was the most important thing, but all right.
It
Go
was
ahead.
not the most important thing, but I think that there's a question of credibility here.
Okay. I mean,
Maybe it
I
was
guess
hyperbole.
maybe and maybe not. Yeah, 8 books a day every day to read 3,000 books a year. Someone did the math and made sure they tried to exploit Cat Williams and that he's lying. But also, if at 12, if you have 162 IQ, how fast you can read?
I'm sure you could read very fast. It was just a
Then
question of
then
whether it
eight
was
books a day
truly
is not
possible or
impossible.
not.
That
Okay.
depends.
Listen, I don't know.
I don't
I've
know.
never tried to read 8 books a day.
And we don't know what type of books he's reading. Maybe each book is not some huge, thick Harry Potter book. Maybe it's more stuff on the slimmer side. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think us mere mortals, we like to try to pick apart the teeny tiny things that genius level people say and do. And I think sometimes it's unnecessary. Like from the 2 hours and 45-minute interview, that's what stood out to this person, that it's impossible to read that many books in a year. It's like, all right, hater. Like that's what you got from the 2 hours and 45 minutes. That was the biggest thing you took from the interview.
I don't think that's the point here. And that's why
I
I said
do.
it's a
I think
question.
people want to major in the minors. Like, why is that what you walked away focusing on?
I don't think that's what I'm trying to say to you. I don't think that that's what that equates to here. Now, maybe that person is someone on the internet who just has nothing better to do, and that's all they took away from it. However, I think bringing it up as part of the conversation is okay, and the reason why is because Katt Williams came out and said a lot of things and made a lot of accusations about a lot of situations and people. And I think once that happens, then people start to question truth. And when people say things that don't add up, maybe this is not the thing that we want to make sure he's telling the truth on, because who cares whether he read 3,000 books a year or not. But the question is then, is everything else he's saying true? I'm not saying I believe him or don't believe him. I'm just saying, when you think about it in that way, there's a different conversation to be had. Not whether he read 3,000 books or not, but whether everything he said is exaggerated or made up or whatever. Do I think he made all of it up? No. But I'm just saying that when someone comes out and they have this and this and this and this and this to say, or they're disputing claims that other people have made, because a lot of what he was doing was saying, oh, well, this person came on your podcast and they said this and that's not true. I think when you're
Uh-huh.
starting to have a conversation about truth, a person's credibility becomes important to you, right? When you're trying to figure out whether this is the person you should believe or that's the person you should believe or somewhere in the middle is the truth, which is probably the most accurate, right? The truth is probably somewhere in between those two things. But so it may not be important to get caught up on the details of how many books he read or, how fast he could run, which I see he did go on the internet. He put a video on the internet proving how fast he could run.
See, I didn't even see that. Look at that.
Yeah, he's on a basketball court and he's running and then he shows the speed. He put that out, I think, this morning.
Oh,
So
okay.
either this morning or yesterday. So that's the only reason why I think it's relevant. Is the singular thing important on its own? No, but I think when we're talking about if a person is telling the truth or not, then we have to take into account whether they were truthful or not. And if there's things where you see, oh, this may not have been true, well, was he telling the truth about everything else? Now, what I do believe is that maybe it was hyperbole. He's a comedian. They do exaggerate the things that they say. They um they have to. What did he say to Shannon Sharpe? My only job is to be funny.
Right.
So I think that's important too. I think you know certain things you do have to take with a grain of salt because you can't unless you can fact check it and like him running across the we'll probably never know about the books, but that's fine. I'm just trying to give a bigger picture idea of why people may be thinking about some of the things he said.
Sure, but then seek out the things that we can prove because, like you said, we may never know about the books, right?
Mhm.
Now, what we do know is there's footage that has been found of Faison Love speaking about the problems between Steve Harvey and Bernie Mac. What we
Mhm.
do know is there's footage that's come out of Cedric doing the joke and Katt Williams doing the joke before him. What we do know is there's footage that came out from years ago of Steve Harvey on the radio talking shit about Katt Williams. Those things we do know.
Mhm.
That's where the effort should go then. Like if you want to highlight something that we probably can't prove at all, what's the point of that? To
Sure.
me, if
I,
if if my if I'm gonna sit there and say, okay, I'm a huge skeptic, I'm gonna press pause every time he says something and try to go find whether it's true or not. The books would not be one of the things that would even make that list because like that's not the meat and potatoes of the interview. The meat and potatoes of the interview is really two specific points. One, people have come up here and lied about myself and others, and so I need
mhm.
to tell the truth. And two, there's a squad in Black Hollywood that does things together and against others. And I need to highlight both of these things that intertwine, whether that's Diddy or Kevin Hart or Steve Harvey. I'm going to
Mhm.
come up here and speak about how it is intertwined and they are doing things to black men in Hollywood.
Yes.
Those are the things that were the overarching messages of the episode.
Sure.
So
That's
that's why I'm like, but then who gives a fuck about a book that he read or didn't read? Like,
well, we may not care, but and you're saying it's something that we can't prove. Technically, you
well, you
can do
said
the
that. You said we probably won't ever know about the books.
we won't ever know if he physically did it or not. But what we do know is that if you do the math,
It's
it
8 books a
doesn't
day.
seem it doesn't seem possible,
I mean,
right?
also he
Based
doesn't
on
have a
math.
9 to 5.
Well, no, and he was a kid when he's saying he was reading all those books, so it's possible.
Right.
Anything is possible. But I'm just saying, I think that was where some of the some of the questioning of certain details came from. Now, maybe
I
I'm
think
wrong.
I think a
Maybe it
kid
was
who
completely insignificant um, when people asked the question, but maybe it wasn't.
I mean, I think it's a moot point, but fine. If people disagree, that's cool. But think about this: you're a 12-year-old who's unemployed and homeless and spending 8 hours in the library every day. Quite possible to read 3,000 books.
Was it 12 when he
That's
left home?
12 or 13, yeah.
Okay.
So that's what I'm saying. He
I
said
don't
he
remember.
left, he was in Florida in the
Right.
library for 8 hours a day. I mean, at 13, what books are you reading? At 13, where you're educating yourself and there's no scholastic anything involved, no academic anything involved, you are the academics. Yeah, you can go to a library and spend a day there and say, all right, this book is 120 pages. I mean, he probably could read that in minutes if he's a speed reader, which that probably should be the follow-up question. But a speed reader reads those pages in minutes.
Sure. I don't really know. I don't. I read at my own pace. I don't really ever worry about
I mean,
anything.
I read slow, but it's not me who's being put under the radar. I'm a
I
slow
mean,
reader. I don't
but
question it. My thing is, let's
that's the only
question
thing
some
that,
shit that matters if we're going to question the interview.
sure. I hear what you're saying. And I don't really think we had to question too much because people came out and said what they said. I think there
Yeah,
was
and then there's that.
people came out and gave clips of whatever it was. Ice Cube said, "Hey, listen, that's not exactly how this happened." Um, I think it's always going to come down to hearsay, right? This person's word against another person's word, because there's only so much fact that you can. Like, I mean, this wasn't on my radar. I'm not the biggest stand-up comedy person, so I didn't know anything about this alliance he was talking about. I found it very interesting and very fascinating. Um, I didn't know how much he had written, which I find that interesting and fascinating as well. I didn't know the
Mm,
stuff about his childhood either,
right.
which also very interesting. I'm always interested in biographical information about people who are otherwise elusive, just because it's interesting to know their background and how they got to where they're going, and what troubles they went through, what triumphs they went through, how they got there.
Right.
I think your story, your journey is important. And while, I know some people just kind of want to get whatever entertainment out of celebrities, I actually find it interesting when they share things about their lives or their upbringing, and
Yeah.
um, because sometimes it does just look like, oh, you were just famous and that's it, and
Right.
that's not true about anybody. So
Right.
everybody has a backstory. Everybody has a life outside of the spotlight, and I
Right.
just find it really interesting. Um, what were the things that stood out to you, though? What
Well,
was really like, or what was the most shocking thing you learned?
oh, for me, that he was a genius and was going to be Doogie Howser. Like, I never knew that. I never would have guessed that. That was impossible for me to ever guess or know.
Yeah,
Um, that was, to me, that was the biggest shock. And maybe because I'm interested in stuff like that, but to me, that was way more shocking than, oh, these people lied, or someone asked me to suck their penis so I could get a role. I mean, that's not shocking. We speak about that all the time. I mean, that's Hollywood's style. We said ourselves, we know that that's built into the foundation of Hollywood. So that didn't surprise me much.
that's so
What
sad.
surprised me was what?
I said that's so sad that that's true.
I mean, that's what Hollywood does, right? Um, that's to me that was what I walked away with it with. I walked away with it thinking, man, who knew that this guy was this much of a brainiac? Like, who knew
Yeah.
that this guy was? I mean, we know he's a genius level comedian. We know he's
Mhm.
an amazing comedian, and uh, also I didn't know the stuff about him being so independent with his music. Excuse me, with his management and the way he runs his business. I never knew any of those behind the scenes things. It was really interesting to hear that. that he's done all these specials pretty much independently and all of those things. That was really interesting. But once you start saying I was friends with Prince and we knew each other for years, that makes total sense, because what has Prince been known to tell people? Own your shit, do your
Yeah.
things independently.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, and Prince was also a very young prodigy. I mean, $1 million deal at 18, right? And so, for
Hmm.
that person to meet up with another young person who's also highly intellectual and independent, it makes sense that they would gel. And Prince
Yeah.
would say, here's what I've learned in this industry as you enter a similar or parallel part of the industry, because it's all entertainment but different subsections. Here's some gems that may be able to help you. Yeah, that makes sense to me that that would be part of the conversation. um so those are the things I walked away with that were the most shocking, the most important. What about you?
I had a thought and then I forgot it. But what I will say, I'm sure it'll come back to me. What I will say is, when it comes to the joke stealing stuff,
Hmm.
as a creator, that hit me. I felt that. There is, it's like, if you're not a creator, it's probably harder to understand. Not to say you can't understand it, but it's probably
Right.
harder to understand when someone steals your idea or steals your whole thing that you
Right.
do. It was something that I noticed was really big a couple years ago, was like, artists who would put up these, particularly black artists, mainly because I was following them, so that's why I know about them specifically. But they would put up their artwork or try to sell their prints online, and then
Hmm.
they would go on like Pinterest, or people who followed them would go on Pinterest and find all of these images that were supposedly someone else's, but it was their original work.
Right.
There is just something, or there's like this thing that people do when you're a creator, not necessarily like Katt Williams, but when you when they'll say, "Oh, I'm gonna take that," or or they're like, "Oh, I got this from you," or and there's no, you don't get anything out of that. They get something out of that. You don't necessarily get anything out of that. I say all that to say, I can understand finding out that somebody was telling your joke, the joke that you sat there and wrote, the joke
Right.
that you perfected, because he talked about, and I thought this was really interesting, and maybe that's the thing that stood out the most to me, is the time that it takes to prepare
Perfect the joke.
and perfect the joke.
Yeah.
When you're not a comedian, at least for me, I don't think about that.
Yeah.
I just think they have these jokes and they tell these jokes and people laugh or they don't. I don't really
Hmm.
think about it as a process. Like, I'm gonna
Yeah.
write this thing and I'm writing out words, but it's not fleshed out yet. And then I gotta, try to make what I wrote more personable. And then I gotta, put a little sauce on it. I gotta make sure it's funny. I gotta make sure everything flows together properly. And then I gotta get on stage and I gotta say it in a cadence that makes sense, in a cadence
Yep.
that people will understand and laugh. And I have to be able to string it all together so that when they receive it and when I voice it, it sounds like something they want to hear. It's something that makes them laugh, because maybe it's the inflection of my voice, or maybe, it's the way I look up at the crowd, or maybe it's my
Right.
silence that cues to them that they should laugh.
Right.
So I think that's really interesting. Um, I would have never really thought about that, and I don't think I've ever heard another comedian describe it that way. Like, when I see Dave Chappelle do his stand-ups, sometimes he has his notes with him, and I'm like, okay, that makes sense to me. Like, as a creator, I take notes all the time about a million different things. Sometimes I'm taking notes about things that I may never ever even look back at, but that's my process, right? Like
Right.
as I make my way throughout the week, I'm like writing things down. Like Halle Bailey had told us she had the baby, or or maybe or maybe I'm sitting on the train and I'm hearing a couple arguing and I think that's really interesting, and maybe
Right.
that triggers a topic in my mind for hardly minding my business. Like it could be anything, right?
Right.
But I always have a notebook with me and I'm always like writing things down, so I totally understand that part of the process. But then going back to it and trying to figure out how to how to
Tweak
say
it.
it, how to tweak it. I just didn't think about that before. And I do that as a podcaster. Like I have videos that are just me practicing my topics. So I get it, and that really resonated with me. And I was like, oh, okay, well, yeah, that's how you become one of the top comedians,
Yeah.
in the world, because there's a lot of practice and there's a lot of repetition and just a lot of
Absolutely.
input that comes with it. And I think sometimes when we don't get to see those things about people and what they do, um, we just see what they do. So it was nice
Right.
to have that insight. It was also, I mean, it was tea, right? Because
Oh, lots
that
of tea. Lots of tea.
it was a lot of tea.
Hey, let me ask you, who you think had the weakest response so far?
Okay, so I gotta be honest. I haven't seen all of them. The
Oh,
week
okay. All right.
I haven't I haven't seen all of them.
Because
I,
Cedric responded, Luda responded,
Ice Cube
um,
responded. Kevin
Ice
Hart
Cube
responded.
responded, Kevin Hart responded. Yeah.
Well, and I was gonna say Kevin Hart. I
Yeah.
was gonna say Kevin Hart just because I feel like this is boring, right? I feel like this part of it, the responses are boring. Come on, write some jokes. The boys got to get in the
Yeah.
lab, write the jokes, and do
And
your
Luda
shows, do
write
your
some
stand
bars.
ups, and let me see your next show, and then I will decide about your response, because that's what I want to see. The same way we call on the rappers and we're like, hey, get in the studio and write something back, or get on your phone and type something out when Drake and Kanye are fighting, or Jim Jones and
Pusha T.
Pusha T. I don't know why I couldn't remember Pusha T's name.
It's all good.
When these guys are feuding and we're like, okay, get to it, write some rhymes. Where are the bars? That's what I want to see from these comedians. Like, you've
Yeah.
been talented,
I think people were scrambling to respond because it was happening so fast, right? Like
and
it
and
went from
and
nobody
spiraling out of
knowing till
control.
it being this big boom of
Yeah,
content. And I think that that's what kind of made them rush to respond. Um,
yeah. I want
yeah, Kevin
jokes,
Hart. Yeah, I mean,
and we'll never get it from him. But I want jokes. I want somebody to come
oh, I
out.
disagree. I think Kevin Hart will respond. I just don't think it'll be good.
You're probably right about that.
Yeah, he'll do a special. He does specials all the time. He'll do
Yeah,
a special and he'll mention it, but it'll be a long time from now and we'll forget that it even happened. And he'll
yeah,
bring it up and he'll joke and the joke will be subpar like they've been.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah. But
I
that's
do
what I want.
think, and we have to move on because we're running out of time, but I do think there's another topic to discuss where Katt Williams was clearly saying, I'm one of the best comedians ever.
Mhm.
And that's cool, but I think there's a different conversation when you speak about the trajectory that some of these people are on and wanted to be on, right? Like Kat wanted to be the best comedian, and he's clearly one of those. Some of
Mhm.
the people he mentioned, they didn't have any interest in being the top comedian. They had other endeavors
Wanting to
that they
be
wanted
movie
to be
stars,
involved in, right? Movie
right?
stars and talk show hosts and all of those things.
Which he says. He says that what I wanted was not what they wanted.
Right. And so I think that's a little bit of a separate conversation,
Mhm.
because there's a difference between being the top in one field versus not wanting to be in that field and trying to go a completely different route.
Right.
But a topic for another time.
Yeah.
We should move on.